What is up, my fellow parents? How's it going? I've said this before. One of the coolest parts about having a podcast is you get to have cool people on, people that we can learn from, people that inspire us, people that, expose us to a whole different world of ideas and thoughts. And so we have a special person here. I get a lot of emails. Jordan, you may not even know this. I get a lot of emails about people being like, hey, can I please come on your podcast? Or I'm a booking agent. Can I have this person come? And I say no to almost all of them. But then when I got this email from Lily Howard Scott's agent about her new book, I looked into it and I said, that looks really interesting. That looks like something a lot of parents would love to hear, that it really aligns with our work about really raising high-level, emotionally intelligent children. And here we are. She's here with us, man.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Lily Howard Scott, I got the book in my hands right now, The Words That Shape Us. And so, Lily, I'm really impressed with this book so far. I can't wait to get to know you and talk about it.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Lily, as I sit here and nerd out a little bit about your book, about your background, about who you are, the main thing that I think we should start off with our listeners is just how you came to have this knowledge and kind of giving everybody an idea how you started in the teaching world and how you really have this book, which is for teachers, but it's for everybody. What did you see while you were teaching that led you to write this and want to share the message?
That's a great question. Well, yes, I taught elementary school for nearly 10 years, mostly third grade, and I still identify as a third grade teacher at heart. And I was always struck by how the words and phrases that my students had access to seemed to play this pivotal role in their ability to self-regulate, in their ability to operate with self-compassion or not, or, even in their ability to find joy throughout the school day. And then I became a parent. And, over the past few years, I've learned so much more about what words can do. And I've had all these confirmation moments where I've better understood what was happening in the classroom.
Yeah.
And most of that work is rooted in Lisa Feldman Barrett's groundbreaking work about how language seeds how our brain predicts, which in turn influences how we feel and what we think and what we do. And so, I think this truth carries really optimistic implications for teachers or parents because how we talk to kids becomes the way they talk to themselves, as you both know so well.
Jordan, we've talked about this a lot. Did you know how much I am on the bandwagon about not calling your kids smart? Like, do you know I nerd out on that, you guys? So I'm like, really, have you heard about that, Jordan? Like the research about how people are not calling their kids smart anymore. Have we talked about that on this podcast, man?
Yeah, right. We talked about how you should embrace the work ethic more than the final product, right? So it's not like you're so smart. It's like, I think you're doing such a great job at working so hard at your homework so you can get a good grade. That's basically what you're saying, right, Sean?
Yeah, right. And Lily, I want to talk to you about that phrase later on in our episode. Is that cool? Are we talking about that? Because that's like kind of what I think we're going to be talking about here with Lily. It's like, one of my favorite sayings, Lily, is parents are teachers and every home's a school. So like we are going to teach our kids things that most school teachers, they can't, they won't. And so you had me at hello, the words that shape us. What a great title. The words that shape us. So I want to really kind of get into it and ask us and kind of just get us started here, because I'm just going to read a couple things. Here's like the first sentence of the whole book. Listen to this, everybody. As a writer, and this is in the foreword, right? So, but it really lines in with the thesis of the book. As a writer and a teacher, I'm continually inspired by the astonishing power of language and its ability to shape our thoughts, emotions, and connections. As a parent, I only wish I had Lily Howard Scott's The Words That Shape Us, the science-based power of teacher language. And then it just goes on. And that's really what you're going to give us some tips and some tools today about how we can maybe incorporate some of this high-level language, whether we are teachers or we are parent teachers or every home's a school. And so let's just like get into it. Give us something that we can start using with our kids, whether they're 3, they're 6, they're 13. Give us a tool we can use right now, and then I'm going to ask you about some of these things that I've seen in the book.
Of course. Well, first, I have to give credit to the great Georgia Hurd, a wonderful poet and teacher who wrote the sentence you just read.
Yeah.
She says that words live alongside us and become our companions. And I think about that all the time, right? Whether it's the words that we hear from the people who care for us, or whether it's just words, in poems or in texts that we cherish.
Yes.
So yeah, if you want to go down another rabbit hole, read Georgia's books. They're extraordinary. But I think when it comes to language that we can share with kids, that kids can tuck away, I mean, there are so many places we could go. We could go with that. One language nugget I've been thinking a lot about that inspires kids with agency they didn't realize they had is simply telling young children, that it's completely typical to think all sorts of things, right, that might not be helpful to us or rooted in truth, but that thankfully we each have an inner voice, which I describe as like the most you part of you, the wisest, kindest part of you that can do what David Foster Wallace, asks us to do. It can kind of choose what to pay attention to in your own mind, like to speak back to a worry or to speak back to a fear, can choose what to amplify, what to quiet. And I think that kids are just told what to do all day by teachers, by parents. And so they don't realize they have that kind of inner agency, right? And just wrapping words around it helps them name
it. All right,
it.
can you give me some examples of this? So I got a 19, I got 15, and I got an 8, and Jordan's got 10. Because on page 11, the first sentence of the whole book, it's so great. When my son Alexander was 4, I optimistically introduced a new phrase to him, inner voice. And then, as soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, this woman's on a different level, and we can all learn from here. Like, she's introducing these children to this deep, truthful, things. And it makes me wonder, did anyone teach me about my inner voice when I was 4, when I was freaking 14?
Pinocchio, right? Jiminy Cricket, telling you what to do.
Right. What do you mean? I don't know that reference.
You ever see Pinocchio? He had his little.
I don't know, man.
Come on, man.
Ago.
The little doll that his nose grows when he tells a lie.
Yes, I know. But...
And then Jiminy Cricket is there saying, "No, Pinocchio, you got to do this. Be a good boy, right?" And then he keeps lying, and so it's like that's what taught us as kids. Like you watch Pinocchio, and you're like, "Oh, okay. There's this little thing on my shoulder that at least tells me what I'm supposed to be doing."
Well, I think you have a point, Jordan, which is that we all have conversations in our heads all day long, and the earlier we normalize this for kids, the better. So, Sean, to sort of go back to that anecdote, in sort of a desperate moment, introduced the idea of an inner voice to my son. And of course, I thought it just bounced off of him, this idea that he gets to listen to this truest, wisest part of himself. He asked me if he could have a pet piranha. But then a month later...
A pet piranha.
And I was like, well, there went nothing,
Yeah.
And then a month later, we were reading this book about the medieval times, and we got to this pretty gruesome caption, honestly. I had not read the book before, about what can happen when knights joust, like gruesome splinter wounds and all sorts of things. And I tried to edit it on the fly, and he got really quiet, and he said, if I was a horse in medieval times and somebody was on top of me, a knight, poking me with spurs, telling me to go joust, he said, I would listen to my inner voice and not move. I would just eat grass. And I remember that my chest sort of unfolded, and I thought, oh my gosh, the phrase did nestle inside him. Wow. And it led him to this new place, which is that when everything seems like it's going one way, when an outcome feels inevitable, you actually have another choice. You can listen to yourself and you can change course. And I'm not sure he would have gotten there without that particular phrase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That totally
makes sense. Oh, yes, that makes sense. It's pretty incredible. You must have felt like a great mom and like, wow.
Well,
that was incredible.
Now, to be clear, we all fail at listening to our inner voices all the time, but at least I know that concept is within him, and I hope he relies on it, as he faces inevitable pressures ahead.
All right, give me some more. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Where did you learn about that? Like, did someone instill that into you? How did you come to that awareness?
That's it was 7 years ago this spring, and I was teaching third grade at a public school in Brooklyn. And I don't know if either of you have read this beautiful essay. I've already mentioned it once in this podcast by David Foster Wallace called This is Water. It's the only sort of public talk he gave about his views on living. And in it, he has this sentence, learning how to think means learning how to choose what to pay attention to in your own head. Right. And I wrote that sentence down on a piece of paper and I put it up in my third grade classroom. Mm-hmm. And the kids wrote these poems for two voices between what we called their inner voice or their wisest self and a feeling of pressure that would visit them or fear. One student of mine called it her president decider, because president decider is the president of her body, gets to choose what to pay attention to and what to not pay attention to. And I remember it was that sentence by David Foster Wallace that got me thinking, yeah, we should give kids language to shape around this idea of an inner leader that gets to make those decisions.
Yes.
And so that's what opened the door for me. But then, of course, there are no new ideas, right? So a couple years later, I learned that Richard Schwartz talks a lot about this with internal family systems, that this idea has been around for a while.
Yes.
But I came to it through that essay. And as you know, as parents, young kids are so unselfconscious that they will write a poem for two voices between their inner voice and a feeling of pressure. And they'll do all this stuff in such a brave, beautiful way that I think a middle schooler won't. And so the hope of this book is that you introduce the language early.
Yes.
It nestles within the kid, and then they rely on it later.
Why don't we, elementary school teachers are incredible. They're a gift to the world. We need them. They're game changers. All teachers are incredible. But this is why don't we remove some of the more unnecessary subjects in middle school, high school, elementary school, and incorporate more EQ learning and inner self-talk, stuff like this? What's your theory or your take on that?
Oh, I love that question. It is, a student once said, I look like I'm listening, but I go into the rowboat in my head and I row away to a more interesting place. And you just hit the nail on the head, Sean, that there is so much at school that just kind of ricochets off of kids, or they might remember it briefly on an assessment, right? And then they forget it. There's so much that happens at school that isn't inspiring. And I do agree with you that, especially as learning is evolving in ways we can barely keep up with, right? And as there's more flexible access to information, it does seem like it would be a good idea to kind of empower kiddos to be more functional humans, right? As opposed to just these vases that we fill up with skills. I think there's much more of a conversation around that now than there was
really
15 years ago. And
well, I mean, school is noisy, right? There is the politics involved. There's the popular kids. That's the jock. Oh, there's the bully, and you're really navigating how to survive rather than really learning, right? And then you're cramming all this info in. And so what's great about elementary school is maybe you have a little more time because you're teaching more simplistic things, and then you have time to I remember my second grade teacher. I remember this as I'm talking to you. We'd have 15 minutes to start every class. We'd do deep breath exercises. We'd breathe in and we'd breathe out.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, we'd meditate a little bit.
Incredible.
And then we'd do little stretches, and it would just get our day going. We don't do any of that once you get to middle school and high school. And I feel like what you're saying is if we could continue that conversation, we would be that much more advanced when we're graduating and turning into adults. But society, that's not happening. So what you're preaching is awesome, but I also feel like it's getting lost in the shuffle of the rat race.
You're exactly right. I mean, in terms of the rat race, and also returning to Sean's question, if we want to value this work, we have to let go of this toxic idea that we have to measure it perfectly. I think so much that is wrong with school is this over preoccupation with measurement. And what can we measure? I suppose we could measure achievement in a standardized test score, though one could argue that's totally biased in its own way. And because this work is harder to measure, often it's not valued. But I love what Jerry Mueller says in his book, The Tyranny of Metrics. He says, much that is unimportant can be measured, and much that is not important can never be, that is important can never be measured. And to your point, Jordan, thank you for seeing the magic in elementary school teachers.
Yes.
They can do something that no middle school or high school teacher can do, which is that they have 1,000 hours a year in the same room with the kids. The kids aren't floating around, and they catch these kiddos at a moment where their capacity for neuroplasticity is remarkable. And when they are really at that point in their lives still open to connecting, with the grownups around them. They're not so crippled by self-consciousness yet, right? So focused on their peers. And so I think that elementary school teachers kind of have this secret power, which is that they can create a connected classroom community because everyone stays in that room for most of the day, and they can give kids words that help them become better readers and writers and mathematicians, but also more functional, self-loving little people. And then hopefully, even if none of it happens in middle school or high school, again, the language is within the kid already.
Mm-hmm. I'm just astonished that I just met you, but I just feel like this intense kindred spirits with you because I feel like you love children. And I just adore children. And yet my platform, my passion is the best way to help children is by empowering parents. Yeah. And so giving parents these EQ skills that maybe you and I weren't raised with, learning from people like you about how we can, and then one of your platforms is to empowering teachers with this. So yes, if we can reach teachers, if we can reach parents, we're going to change the world by how we empower and educate children on their own mindfulness, their own self-awareness and self-love, right? Do you agree with me on that?
I totally agree. And I think what's so lovely about this work is that it's all rooted in these micro moments, right? Like, I love what Dr. Bruce Perry says, that lasting change is never brought about through like a 50-minute heart-to-heart with a kid. The kid will want to run away. It's the steady accumulation of connected moments that are like under 2 minutes long.
Yes.
And the language we use in those moments. And so if a third grade teacher teaches a kid about the concept of ishfulness, which is the idea that nothing turns out the way you imagine it will. You might start to draw an elephant one way. It turns out some other way. But be gentle on yourself. There's beauty and delight lurking in the unexpected. That a teacher teaches a kid about that concept of thinking ishfully. And then the kiddo, that takes 5 minutes, but the kiddo internalizes that and can write ishfully and
okay, I need your help. I need your help. Okay, I need your help. Okay, all right, Jordan. I need.
Oh, and if that sounds
Lily,
crazy, that's inspired by a picture.
It does because I need your help. Okay, because even though I do this for a living, and I think I'm okay at it. Jordan and I are very typical men.
Got it.
I over the weekend. This is what I did on the weekend, Lily. On Friday night, I went to an UFC MMA fight. Okay. And I sat 8 feet from the cage. On Saturday night, my wife and I went to an NBA basketball game.
Great.
And on Sunday, great sports weekend.
Yeah.
We had a Super Bowl party at the house, and I probably had 30,000 calories. And now I'm meeting with you, and you're casually telling me about this thing called ishful thinking.
Right.
Like, and see, you got to slow it down, girl.
Thanks
you gotta,
for backing
you
me up.
got to slow it down. You got to help me understand what you're saying. Because I do this every day, and I'm confused.
I'm not talking to another third grade teacher.
Right. You got to slow it down for me. And if I'm confused, then maybe other dads and some moms are confused. Give me a little bit slower. Like, how do I talk to my 8-year-old about ishful thinking? Like, give me like a phrase. Give me like a role play it out with me.
Peter H. Reynolds wrote this groundbreaking picture book called Ish. And it's been a hit across the world. And it's about a little boy who tries to draw a flower.
Okay.
You can add it. You can, here's
it's in your book. I did see it's in your book. It's on like page 90-ish. Please continue.
Yes. Yeah. This little boy, Ramon, he tries to draw a flower. It doesn't look like the flower he had in mind. He tries to draw a turtle. Doesn't look like the turtle he had in mind. It looks like something else. He crumples up all his drawings. He puts them in the garbage. And his sister uncrumples them. And she hangs them all around his bedroom. And he walks in and he sees them. And he says, well, that doesn't look like a flower. That doesn't look like a turtle. And she says, well, it's flower-ish. It's turtle-ish. And thinking ishfully means getting started on something and sticking with something, even if it does not look like what you originally intended. It means being gentle on yourself when inevitably you're creating something that surprises you. And not only that, it means like looking for joy and beauty in what you create. And so many young kids, I see it all the time because perfectionist tendencies are skyrocketing.
Yes. Okay. This is so
in
good.
Thomas Curran. So what they'll do is
yes.
they'll write something or draw something. It doesn't look like what they wanted to do. They will rip it up. I've seen kids hide under the table. I've seen kids weep or refuse to get started unless they know exactly what comes next.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you give a kid ishful language, here's what happens in their brain, if you don't mind nerding out with me. So what Lisa Feldman Barrett teaches is that language can be an energized determination. And what that means is if a teacher says over and over, think ishfully, see what happens, eventually the kid internalizes that as self-talk.
Okay,
and as they're
helps.
drawing that African elephant and it does not look like they thought it would, if they rely on that phrase, it's all right, be ishful about it, in that moment, their brain begins to seed a little differently. It predicts a little differently, and they can meet that moment of what they're creating, not looking exactly like they hoped it would, with much more self-regulation or even curiosity, as opposed to with a swell of frustration. And so that's the power of language, is that it shifts how our brains predict, right? And so that's an example of what ishful language can do. Language like what a brilliant mistake, what learning can you find in it, also
what
can
a
see
brilliant,
that shift.
You got to slow down when you say this deep stuff. You got to slow down. Go ahead, Jordan. I'm just sick it in. Take Jordan.
So I enjoy what you're saying. I think it's all great advice and it looks good on paper. From a guy's perspective, though, using that terminology is not in my everyday vocabulary, right? So I'm going to have to learn about this. But then there's also these listeners probably thinking like, dude, that's too feminine for me. I'm not going to be using that terminology. What are we making our men into women or whatever people are thinking in their heads right now, right? Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you an example. So my daughter's an artist too, and she's had this same situation that you described, trying to draw something, gets so frustrated. Oh, I'm just so terrible. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is beautiful. Yeah. But then I also say like, that's why we practice. We got to continue to keep working on it so we can get better. So I'm using phrases that are a little different than you are. Yeah. Is that still okay? Are we on the same path of like, hey, practice makes perfect. You got to get out there and grind if you want to succeed. And you got to, pull up those bootstraps if you want to get stuff done.
Thanks for mentioning that. I think two things are true. One, you got to use language that feels right to you. So for instance, like when I introduced the idea of an inner voice to my student, and then she said, I want to call it President Decider. You say, great. You call it whatever you want.
President Decider.
I try to listen to I now call it President Decider.
That's so cool.
But also, Jordan, in terms of ishfulness, I guess I'd push back gently because if you read that book to your 8-year-old, and it's perfect for an 8-year-old, I'd ask, what is it within us or within a man that feels a little bit uncomfortable saying, hey,
that's a great question. Right.
Because that's not weak. Thinking ishfully means you keep going when it doesn't turn out exactly the way you wanted. And alongside that, you practice. I'm not saying don't have a growth mindset or don't practice. It's not about doing something halfway. It's about understanding literally nothing in the world turns out precisely the way we imagine it will, ever. Right. And the earlier we normalize that for kids and the earlier we shape language around it, then they can actually get started on hard stuff and keep going through hard things once they internalize that truth. And so, of course, keep practicing.
I'm just thinking of like Tiger Woods' dad, right? Like Tiger Woods is this young prodigy playing and his dad's like, dude, keep going, right? Or like think of these sports people where it's like their terminology is going to be different. It's more burly. It could be more hardcore. It could also be devastating, right? Think of Michael Jackson's parents.
With Tiger Woods' dad, I mean, look, I have some more learning to do, but do we really want to emulate that? So much pressure.
Right. But that's the stereotype, right?
So then let's start pushing back that so much, it's so funny. Dysregulated anxiety is characterized as a behavior issue. Regulated anxiety often just looks like super high achievement. But no matter what, no matter where you are, I think every kiddo benefits from learning to talk to themselves with love. And if they don't learn to do that, fine, Tiger Woods was a prodigy, and then what happened?
Right.
It kind of went haywire. Like, it all comes out sometime. And so I don't think it's a feminine thing or a wishy-washy thing to give kids words to talk to themselves with more love, right?
Great. No, that's a great answer.
Great answer. Agree. Great pushback. Let me jump in and say kind of some of this. I feel like, Jordan, like Lily is just on a whole different level right now than anyone like we'll ever meet. Like her insights are so deep and they're so out there. It's going to take some time for us to really think it through. Like, she just casually said a phrase a few minutes ago in her book, and I did my little thing, like that's so, remember, like I do, but it was like, what was it? It was like, that was a brilliant mistake. What did you say?
Yeah. Oh, what a brilliant mistake. What learning can we find in it?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what I'm saying. As a compliment to you, I feel like we got to slow down. We have to really think about that. And I'm just trying to imagine myself as a man, as a dad, saying to my teenagers and to my, hey, what a brilliant mistake. Let me just practice right now. Everyone just go to a different place if you're listening and just try to imagine yourself saying that to your kids. Hey, what a brilliant mistake. You know? What a brilliant mistake.
I might not mention it without the context. So you're right. We do need to slow down. I think if you just said to a kid, what a brilliant mistake, they'd be like, what are you talking about? It was a mistake. But if you framed it like, look, for centuries, we thought mistakes were something to be embarrassed of. We now know through Carol Dweck's research and many other researchers that the most powerful cognitive growth of all occurs when we have the capacity to sit with our mistakes and investigate them. Like Alexander Fleming, he was a Scottish scientist who went on a 2-week vacation. He left his petri dish uncapped. He came back. It was all moldy. He didn't ignore his mistake, pretend it didn't happen. He looked at it. He discovered that the mold was killing bacteria. He ended up discovering penicillin. Because when you pay attention to your mistakes, that's when learning happens. And so you could say, here's why I'm going to call it what a brilliant mistake. I want you to gain the ability to sit with the discomfort of making errors, to actually learn from them. I'm not saying go just make mistakes willy-nilly. I'm saying, I'm going to say this phrase to you because when you really sit with it, you can carry learning forward. So when you make a mistake, try saying to yourself, what a brilliant mistake, what brilliant learning does it have for me? And I'd say this is most appropriate for 4 through 9. And I have seen this phrase in particular work magic. Like, I have seen kids tuck it away, repeat it to themselves, and kids who previously would they'd rather do anything else than actually sit with an error and pay attention to it.
Right.
Get the ability to pay attention to their mistake and actually find learning in it. Again, because the way we talk to them ideally becomes the way they talk to themselves.
And wouldn't you agree, just to take what you just said, just to continue making a full circle moment, why is it that so many kids and teenagers have a fixed mindset? Why do so many afraid of failing? Why are so many afraid of putting themselves out there? Or why are so many so hard on themselves, whether they're the straight A AP student or the kid who's struggling with C's? It's because that inner voice. It's because the most powerful voice in someone's life is their own voice, and there's something that is not positive in that. They don't think wishfully. They're not thinking about their mistakes. They're not thinking. They're just, whatever is going on in that head has got serious issues, and now we can address this with love and intention, whether you're a teacher or a parent. Are we on the same page? Is kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. Or I think just normalizing that voice will never go away. That part of you that says, oh, you're such an idiot, you made that mistake. Yeah. Or, oh, you should really do what everybody else is doing in order to belong. That I think the most important thing I'm trying to do with this book is not say you shouldn't hear that in your head, because we all will, but more giving kids tools to have inner agency to choose, right? What you want to pay attention to in your own head, what thoughts you want to amplify, which ones you want to quiet, right?
Yeah.
So what, you said you learned this, 7-8 years ago, some of the stuff that you're teaching. So you were, an adult. A lot of, kids don't know this. A lot of adults don't even know this. So what would be your advice for someone listening to this? Be like, man, this all sounds good, but I'm still figuring out how to use language properly in my own life. Do you just urge those folks to just continue on our path of learning?
Yeah, well, I hope this doesn't sound like a too self-promotional answer, but I guess I would say if anything we've shared has struck a chord, that what I hope to do with this book is that anybody could open it up to any page and learn about a little language nugget and adapt it and think about how they might want to try it on themselves. Because I do think that when kids watch grown-ups, a teacher or a parent, use the language themselves and navigate their own humanity, they follow suit. So a parent could say something like, oh man, I'm working on this PowerPoint for work and it's not turning out the way I want it to. I'm going to think wishfully. I'm going to, you know what? It's fine. I'm going to, maybe something surprising will happen that makes it even better than I thought it would, that I can't imagine yet. I'm going to keep going. And you just model that as a think aloud. Don't expect the kid ever to say something like, thank you so much for telling me. I'm going to think wishfully next. Like,
thank you, teacher.
Literally, the kid will not even look up from what they're doing. But you've modeled it. They've heard it. And maybe in a moment, a month from now, kind of like my son did, they may think, all right, I'm going to think wishfully and just keep going. It's not turning out the way I planned, but I'm going to keep going. And that's all we can do. And maybe even it helps the conversations within your brain as the grown-up be a little bit lovelier, right?
That's good.
And
just to echo what you just said, I had this great conversation with these parents out of Boston inside of my VIP membership yesterday. And he was talking about how he's using these new skills with his teenage boys.
Yeah.
And the mother was saying, you know what? It doesn't feel genuine. They're saying the right things to us now. They're really working hard to speak to us well, use these deep level EQ skills, but it doesn't feel genuine. It feels like they're going through the motions. And then listen to the dad's brilliant response. He said, you know what I think it is, Sean? To learn new skills and trades, sometimes you have to just go through the motions. You have to practice them. And we're practicing them. And it feels like maybe our kids aren't listening sometimes. They're not really there, but it's clear they are. They're soaking this up. So that's a real life story from just 24 hours ago that actually echoes Lily Howard Scott's words about incorporating these and just being patient with the process.
Right.
Yeah. And letting go of the illusion of, let me measure this right away and let me look for some validation right now that it worked. Like, I think we just have to let go of that, model it, see what happens, maybe talk about a character in a read aloud using some of this language, move on. And then there you go.
Yeah. Okay, Lily, our episode is almost over. So I got 2 more questions for you before we're done. Okay. The second question I want to ask you is, just so you can get ready to answer it, is, tell us one great parenting tool that all of us can start using today, like something we could start incorporating. Okay, that's
Other
the
than
second
the 2
question.
you've already listed.
You can use the same tool. Yeah, you can use the same one, or you can do a new one. Just something like, give us like a 30 second. Okay, and here's the first question. Okay, here's the first question. You are already successful in your work, because I'm looking at page 31 of your book. I'm holding it up if you're watching this on YouTube. And she has this little drawing. It's just a drawing of a human being. This one's of a boy. And this is one of her activities that she's incorporating, and teach you to do it, whether you're a teacher or a parent. And what you do is you ask the child to write down things that are like external in their life, like things that they like, hobbies. This kid loves Harry Potter. I'm a boy. I'm sometimes funny. I'm sometimes serious. I'm 9-year-old. I'm tall. I'm shy. I share a lot, and I love to write. And then on the inside, it has all these deep feeling words, right? I like that that he feels like, I love to step away from the world into a book. The 9-year-old wrote that. I love my family. He writes, let's see, pressure to be the oldest. He wrote that, Jordan.
He also writes, sometimes I'm the good kid and not very naughty, so it's a bigger deal when I steal candy than when other kids do it. I love it.
Oh, isn't it so funny looking at like kids' grade school work? Like, I love when friends post it on social. They're like, oh my gosh, look what my kid just wrote, And like, they're so honest and they're so sweet and they're so shocking, the things they're picking up on.
That kid on the outside looked like the perfect kid. And what he's doing is he's jotting about his outer shell and his inner swirls. And when he wrote in his inner swirls that even he gets in quote unquote trouble sometimes, I will never forget when other kids who struggled more in the class looked at him and went like this, which was our classroom signal for, I have a mirror to you. And it reminded me of that thing James Baldwin talks about, which is that it's always what you think alienates you from other people that connects you most deeply.
Right. Yes.
And when we normalize for kids sharing about our inner swirls, they find all these unexpected mirrors that validate them and just make them feel a little bit less alone in experiences they thought were uniquely theirs.
Good. So I'm going to let Lily answer the question now. What is one good tool? But before you do, I'm just going to give you all a tool. You can have your kids, whether they're older and you're teenagers and you're in a family meeting, or you are little kids, you can just draw a picture. Of course, if you want to go deeper with her teaching, you can buy her a book, and then just have your kids write down what are when people look at you, what are your external hobbies, your passions, who are you, and then write down some deep inner world thoughts and things you think about. Is that a fine probe?
Outer shell, inner swirls map. And sometimes there's a tension between our representative selves and our inner selves, right? And sometimes kids are ready to address that tension and communicate something about themselves that they actually don't feel like you really know. But to your other question, here's the strategy I rely on, which I learned from my mentor, Andrea. One, I repeat Dr. Ross Greene's words to myself almost every day. His words are, kids do well if they can, which doesn't knock you off your chair till you consider the alternative. Kids do well if they want to. Kids do well if they can means if this kid is not doing well, it's usually not an issue of motivation. Something's hard for this kid. He's got a lagging skill or an unmet need. And when I repeat that to myself, I'm just much more regulated and a much better parent than when I'm like, try harder, stop doing that. You know what I mean? Also,
self-talk.
You can say that about people. Like, people do well if they can. And when they're not doing well, what's hard for them about that moment?
Right.
And then Andrea also taught me this. When you want to get into a power struggle with your kid, which I have done many times, when it feels like that kid is powerful or insulting you or getting your goat, she said, picture the newborn baby face on the face of the child. And remember that you have all the power. You are the grown-up. Step outside of the power struggle. This kid may look big and strong and may be saying hurtful things, but they're wrapping words around some other thing they can't quite even articulate yet. This is a child. You are the grown-up, and an escalated grown-up can never calm an escalated child. And when I feel that tug of like, you're trying to get me, I just try to picture that newborn baby face. And then I remember, nope,
that's good.
Kids do well if they can. And I'm able to just be a bit more regulated in that moment. Now I fail all the time, but that's okay. I try to
practice. Lily, those are great tips, great advice. Thank you. That's so good.
It's not me, it's Andrea, wonderful special educator in Brooklyn.
Well, thanks for echoing it.
Yes.
Well, Lily Howard Scott, you wrote the words that shape us. Where can people find you or kind of go deeper with you or this book? It's been great having you.
Thank you. I support schools around the country, and I'm working with families now too. So they can head to my website, lilyhowardscott.com, and find the book on Amazon. And I'm so grateful to you both for having me on today.
Thanks for coming. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for coming.